Hello, everyone. My name's Tim. You're watching Lost in Law. I bring the common understanding of the law to the common person. Joining me today, lovely and distinguished guest, Miss FaranBalanced. Please introduce yourself to my audience.
Well, first of all, I love when you call me lovely. That's the first
Always.
thing.
Oh, I
Second
called
of all,
Ian lovely too. I mean, you're not the only
we
one.
might have the same length of hair, but that might be,
Yeah.
debatable. But no, I'm not going through puberty. There's strep throat going around here in the United States. But I am a news anchor who has been in the business for over 15 years, and I cover the news very as my name is fair and balanced. But I have covered my biggest start was with criminal law and covering court cases. So I was sitting there in the courtroom covering start to finish court cases from local news all the way to national news. So I see things in the way that like juries are seen and the way that defendants, prosecution, the audience is seen. I am the person that is in there that sees everything and reports on it. So I am that different person that sometimes people hate and sometimes people love, depending upon what court case and when we are in history.
Yeah, there's always two sides to a story, and not everyone's on the same side. So, no,
Mm-hmm.
I totally get it. And I guess you're wondering why I brought Farron in today. Well, this actually originated from a conversation I had with Ian on my last video. You can click up top to see that one. But we were talking about how the media reports on cases, and Mr. Uncle had stated that he's run trials where he reads his own case in the newspapers the next morning, and he does not recognize it, if not for the name of the defendant appearing in the article. So just the way sometimes they'll just completely misrepresent facts. Like I would like to call it a mistake, but I've seen
Yeah.
instances where they say the age of someone or when a certain event occurred. It was never in the court transcript. So implying that that's a mistake means like, oh, like both sides are at fault here. Maybe it was just a kind of a misspeak by the prosecutor or the defense. Sometimes it almost looks like they fabricate things right out of thin air. And I don't know if it's just to fill a word limit, but so I went out and I sought an expert to help dig into this phenomena. So, Farron, thank you for joining me and thank you for helping me dissect this topic.
It's so interesting because a lot of it really depends on what kind of case it is. Okay, so that's the first thing. All right. So, for example, with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial with a defamation case, and with the amount of evidence that was presented that many lawyers could see from the onset, they realized, oh my God, this was a case of a man brutally abusing his wife, and with the bed, with the wine bottles, with the vodka bottles, with, the sexual assault, all of that other different things. People, the media can go through, we have the opportunity to go through those court cases and read through and realize, oh my God, this is a freaking case. And that's why the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial was so insane, because it was one of these things where honestly
I like
the
the storm, I
assaults,
guess. Yeah.
yeah, the assaults that were claimed were insane, to the point where many women, for example, many women journalists like myself looked at it and said a broken bottle up your vaginal calf would definitely bring you to the ER, but she never went to the ER. So there's
Yeah.
a number of different things, like for example, for that case. However, then you have, like, for example, the Menendez brothers, okay? So a lot of this started with the Menendez brothers back in LA, back in the late 90s, okay? And you had these two young brothers who were accused of killing their parents. And the whole point thing, like the whole point was is that, oh my God, this is the first time cameras are in the courtroom, right? And you see these two brothers where one is kind of in the case and one is kind of out of the case. When I say that, meaning like one brother is accusing the father of sexual abuse and the other isn't. And you see that there is a hung jury. And everybody was glued to the TV in the sense of, oh my God, like we can watch a trial go on. Mind you, this is before LawTube, where we could all like talk about what's going on and what this objection means and what that means. And then during the Menendez trial, you have the O.J. Simpson Ford Bronco chase, where you actually have O.J. Simpson being put in a cell next to Lyle Menendez, okay? And then the O.J. Simpson trial is put on camera. And there's all these different things going on as far as the Rodney King riots, as far as the LA riots. He gets finally, called not innocent, or called, I'm sorry, not innocent.
Yeah.
Many would say that.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. But then when the Menendez brothers went for their second trial after a hung jury, there were no cameras in the courtroom. And it was a full-on guilty verdict. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. So like you're seeing how the media can literally take things and not only see things, and it's a double-edged sword. It's truly a double-edged sword. Like for example, like I saw, for example, in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, okay? And I had a primetime show at the time, and that's how I got first introduced to LawTube. When I got into my primetime show, okay, and Kyle Rittenhouse was called a white supremacist, called a Second Amendment radical, all of this crap, right? We all in the news were like, okay, I guess that's what he is. And then I started watching Nick Rekieta. I started watching all of his legal analysis. And then I saw the infamous, or some would call infamous, but the famous clip where you see, I can't remember the exact guy's name, but he says, I drew my weapon upon him, and therefore Kyle Rittenhouse. Yes. And then therefore Kyle drew upon me, and they were like, that's it. Trial's over. We're done.
Yeah. That was the moment. So Viva Fry made that moment pretty popular. His tweet went viral.
But what's funny is that CNN said, there you go. He drew first. He's a white supremacist. And that's where everybody was like, everyone was like, wait a minute. And I even said, I was like, wait, and logically, I'm watching Fox, I'm watching CNN in my cubicle where, I run my primetime show, and I have Nick Rekieta on over here. And I'm like, wait, Fox doesn't know. CNN says he's a white supremacist. Nick Rekieta says the trial's over. That's self-defense. And then you find out the way that the trial ruled was self-defense. I was like, wait a minute. Independent. At the time, I thought Nick was independent media. I was like, wait a minute. He's independent media. He was right. And so that's where you start to realize that the media, one, truly doesn't know the law. And two, they will literally jump on whatever narrative they need to jump on in order to
sell ads,
fix the ratings.
You know what? That's
yes,
and that is not a knock against the media. Like every corporation that exists, including lawyers.
No, it is. It's a knock against the media.
We do
it's
exist.
It's our job to report the truth. But I'm a realist, though. The
corporate entity exists to make money.
Right.
Otherwise, you couldn't do business. Right. Return value to shareholders. In some cases,
but even Fox News at this point didn't even understand it. And that's where I saw Nick, and I was like, wait a minute, hang on. Like this guy is even before Fox News. Fox News is still sitting here with their thumb up their ass waiting. And I was like, wait a minute. And that's where I went above Fox News. I will tell you this. One of my famous moments in my career was I went out and I was like, folks, Kyle Rittenhouse is going to be charged not guilty strictly because of what this lawyer has said. And I showed the clip with Nick on my primetime show that was an international show of 1.2 million viewers internationally, like the same amount as Tucker, but internationally. And that's when people realized, they were like, oh God, this girl knows what she's talking about because she's watched this lawyer.
And we've been lied to.
And I will say, Nick gave me a lot of credibility for that sentence, a lot of credibility. But at the same time, I watched him and I was like, there's no way. There's no way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a couple of follow-up questions just on some of the previous things you had touched upon. So I'm curious, of course, you're putting together for your primetime show. Do you ever consult an in-house lawyer? Were you provided with one to say, hey, can you check over?
Nope.
And you have and I know you have very tight deadlines to run on, right? I know that if you're trying to get a quote from someone, or you're going to try and get a statement like, hey, I've got this deadline, please respond before then. So I know that it's always very quick. You don't have the luxury of time to give that over to a lawyer, but I think I think it's a massive oversight. If you've been in the courtroom, there has to have been moments where you're like, I have no idea what any of these people are talking about.
It's interesting because I've followed court cases, or at least I've covered court cases since I was like about 23 years old, really freshly into just coming out of my career, just coming out of my college education. And when I went into the international network space, I had a lawyer at my beck and call. I will tell you that. And that's where I can understand, like, where your Fox and your CNN, where they can call whatever kind of lawyer that they want. I need a Second Amendment pro lawyer. I need an anti-Second Amendment lawyer. These folks can call these people on a dime. And whenever you hear that they're a Fox News contributor or a CNN contributor, folks, that means that they're paid. Okay. They're paid to be there. That's not like they they just know so much. That means that they are paid to be there. Okay. Number one. Number two, the lawyers that I talk to, which, for example, Robert Barnes was actually one of them when it came to Kyle Rittenhouse, because he had been on RT America a number of times, had said, like, no, he's gonna get off. Kyle Rittenhouse is gonna get off. He's gonna get off for self-defense. There's a point in your career where you realize, as a journalist, okay, wait a minute, like, this person, and again, like in my monologue, I said, okay, this guy said I shot him because he pointed at me, and then I shot him. As a journalist, you realize, okay, that's self-defense. Okay. And you can't fight logic in that. And there's a lot of journalists today that literally fight their logic just to fit the narrative of who they work for. And I understand, because they get a paycheck. Trust me, I get it. Yeah. I have friends that are at CNN, that are at Fox, that are MSNBC. I get it. But at the same time, I feel very grateful that I don't have to be at one of those places to literally fight my brain and say, are you kidding me? Because, again, the night when Kyle Rittenhouse, when it was found out, or when it was shown that it was self-defense, and then I showed Nick Rekieta's legal analysis, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I feel good. I can go to bed happy. I never like to not go to bed happy and feel like, did I not report that accurately? Was there something that I missed? And I get there are people in the business that are very okay with that. But for me, call it Catholic guilt, call it journalistic guilt, call it whatever you want. But there's just something within me where I'm just like, I can't do that.
That's incredible. I mean, just going back to Like, have stories been spiked where you're just like, I really want to pursue this, I want to pursue this story, I want to pursue this breaking news, and you just get a call from the top that says, we're spiking it, it's not interesting, our fans aren't going to like it, or fans, our audience isn't going to like it. If you've got an example that you're
Tim,
allowed to talk about.
no, it was the reason that I left it was the reason that I left local news. I was working in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was around 2018, and there was a major recall with a GM truck, or GM car, or GM truck. I can't remember exactly. And it was where the gas pedal was sticking.
That was
To
pretty highly
where,
publicized, wasn't it?
yeah, very highly publicized.
Uncontrolled acceleration, which is a very big problem in a vehicle. Like, there are other recalls for like, hey, yeah, like if you crash, this thing might fail. Unintended acceleration can actually kill people.
Oh yeah. And I had finally found a girl. When I say girl, I would say a mother, who had 3 little kids, who had that problem and had lost her leg. And a lot of people don't understand, like, for example, like veterans, or, like anybody that, like, loses a limb. They think, oh, like, everything is going to be okay and you can just kind of learn it in a couple months. No, it's,
God,
for
no.
example, like anything lower from your hips down is very, very difficult to learn. I mean, you literally have to relearn how to walk. And this woman lost her right leg because it was the foot that was on the accelerator. She lost it. And I, had found her by chance. And I talked to her and I said, I was like, I don't want to exploit you. I was like, but, I want to hear your story and what's going on. And yeah.
That's always been journalism to its core, is telling stories.
And it's so hard these days, Tim, because you don't even realize, like, how you'll even see on Twitter, like, oh my God, my mom's in that Walmart. Oh my God, there's a shootout. Like, hope my mom's okay. And they're like, hey, do you think your mom would talk to us? And it's like, oh my God, like,
no sense of self-awareness, right?
Exactly. Right.
One little iota of introspection. And I've seen journalism vultures. Like, they call lawyers ambulance chasers. The media ain't far behind.
No, the media is there first. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
They'd
stick out their leg and trip the lawyer on the way to running after the ambulance.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And that's where I saw this woman, and I had seen her GoFundMe. And I had messaged her because she had her email, and I was like, hey, I really want to help. I was like, I really want to learn your story about, everything that happened, blah, 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 blah. And I went to my news director and I was like, hey, I have the story. I was like, this woman lost her leg. She's got 3 little kids. She's in the hospital, like, it sounds really, really jaded. And I tell you, like, we're not jaded, but at the same time we are. We don't look at people as numbers or whatever, but like when you're in the business, it's just what's happened. But I said, I was like, this is a fucking amazing story. I was like, people have forgotten about her. GM's not talking to her. I was like, we are going to help this woman. And she goes, Faran, I love it, but it's never going to get past upstairs. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, GM's our biggest sponsor. And I go,
probably run a ton of truck commercials every slot.
And I go, okay. And I walked out and I literally looked down and I was like, how long do I have before I can like let something like that go?
Yeah.
And it was like 2 weeks, not even. Yeah. And I will tell you, I felt terrible. I felt really, really bad. I purposely showed up late to work. I didn't give a shit because I wanted them to fire me, because I was just like, if you're going to fuck these kind of people over, I don't care if you like, I don't care if I, I don't want to fuck my coworkers over because in TV, it's really, it's a tough gig. You're all working really long hours and whatnot. But I was like, if they're willing to fuck this girl over, I'm willing to fuck my coworkers over because at least they're getting paid. At least they're getting health insurance. This woman's getting nothing. And I purposely showed up late every single morning for the next 2 weeks until they fired me. And I was like, not a problem. Not a problem. And they were shocked because I didn't cry or nothing. And they were like, we don't understand. And I was like, I can't.
No, you clearly don't
work here.
You've made it very clear you don't understand.
Exactly. And it was really tough, but because I felt bad because I knew I was screwing my coworkers, and that was the one thing that I didn't want to do. But at the same time, when I heard them say, we'd rather help our advertisers than a mother of 3 who lost her leg that is low on health insurance and all that stuff, I was like, I'm done.
And so Canada's got a public broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So they do sell advertising space, but it's the government, I believe, is their main revenue stream, or if not very close to it. So obviously, there's good and bad with that, using taxpayer money to fund a propaganda arm of the government, as many would call it. But a story like that, and so CBC runs this thing called CBC Marketplace. And it's exactly what you were talking about, right? Investigating companies who are screwing over customers, getting them out into the national audience so that people will bring social pressure to companies and make the cost of ignoring this person too high. And so, and I mean, I don't have any proof or evidence, but I would go ahead and just assume that they have spiked Marketplace investigations, because it was investigating someone that was friendly to a senior management, right?
Yeah.
Of course, office politics happens everywhere. No industry or company is immune from it, and that's how this kind of decision making is made. But I do want to bring us back over,
especially in Michigan, though, too. And I will tell you, for your exclusive, I have never told anybody this, as far as that I purposely tried to get fired because I was not happy.
You're giving me the scoop. I feel honored.
Even my parents, I have never told them this to this day. Because again, I met this woman who lost her leg, who had these young kids, and who they were fighting hard to not have to pay her. And the fact that I couldn't report on it, I was like, I can't do this.
Michigan, right? The big 3, the automakers, obviously, they're the untouchables, right? That's like if you were at the Milwaukee news desk and you're running a story that slags the Packers.
Right, exactly. Or Chicago, where you slack the Bears, you slack the Blackhawks, or whatever. And mind you, journalism, there is a lot of pressure to do that. I will say, I had the backing of parents that would say, hey, if you need to come back home, we're here, because I had been on the road since I was 18 doing journalism. So in any way, they were like, hey, come on home, we miss you, we haven't had you since you were home since you were 18. But I will tell you, I have never told anybody until this podcast that I purposely tried to get fired because I was like, I can't fucking work here anymore. And mind you, and I will tell you, I was vindicated because about 8 different people after me left, and then the GM was fired for embezzling money. So I was the catalyst where I was like, I'm seeing something. I don't like this. Fire me so I at least get my severance or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
And then the domino effect happened. But that's a lot of local news stations, and it's sad. It's sad because they should be there to. This is the last line of defense. This is what you have to check your city managers, to make sure your mayors are doing what they're supposed to do, to make sure that, you know, city boards or the boards of directors are doing what they're supposed to do. You know, like,
Oh, speaking of
that's your
boards,
last line of defense.
speaking of boards, so we just had a mass shooting in just outside of Toronto in a suburb called
Mm-hmm.
Vaughn.
Yeah.
And so that was someone targeting this condo board. Now, this person
Mm-hmm.
looks pretty crazy just going through social media history, like Matthew Harris, that unbreaded guy that Nick
Right.
always does.
Mm-hmm.
Like levels of insane and crazy. So I'm inclined to sympathize with the condo board this time around, which is really rare when I hear condo board and tenant disputes. But um, like holding people accountable is it's central because it's central to a proper functioning society. Because when you don't hold people accountable, then you get escalation. And escalation can take many forms, and not all of them are good. And it's like we find it's the duty of the media to be on the forefront of and putting pressure on companies and government to change policies, procedures, to just make some sort of change. And so, I covered this with Runkle as well. And there were some high profile shootings in Toronto that led to what the public perceived as lenient sentences. And so when the media reported those lenient sentences, there was this uproar that caused the Canadian government to pass mandatory minimums for gun crimes, many of which have been found unconstitutional. But you can see this kind of reaction, and the entity that started it was the media, because they took the facts from the case and then made it
Right.
public. Now, as
Mm-hmm.
Runkle said, the facts they took from those cases were the media. The media is going around saying, "Well, this is a lenient sentence," and lawyers who defended the accused, the guilty, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said, "Well, I have a different opinion on whether that was a lenient or harsh sentence or not, because you weren't there." Now, in Canadian courtrooms, we don't have cameras, so you have to physically sit in there and write notes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you were reporting on cases, did you ever get access to a transcript, or did you have
Oh,
to take notes?
well, so that's one of the biggest things. That's like the biggest. I could compare it to text messages. Okay, today,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like you're in a text conversation with a woman, right?
Oh, and they're
And
using
she's,
like letters and shorthand and
or
acronyms.
no, she's like, she says, like, for example, you're gonna meet me tonight, aren't you? And you're like, yeah, for sure. And she says, wait a minute, for sure. Like, that sounds like, like you're not going to. That sounds like
Yeah,
just like a riffraff, like, for sure.
right. When you
But
get the
like
text, you
not
lose the
not a
expression, right?
confirmation. Yeah. Yeah, like that doesn't sound like a confirmation. That sounds like a just, yeah, for sure, like an answer.
Yeah, was that
And so
sarcastic?
exactly. So
So if
like
you're
that's
listening
what
to the witness on the
happens.
stand, okay, so there's some lost in translation.
Well, so that's what happens when you're a person of the media and you get the transcription and you were not there, which
Oh.
sometimes can happen, which is why a lot of times, like during a lot of these high profile cases, for example, in the United States, OJ Simpson trial, the Menendez brothers, Casey Anthony,
Mhm,
John Benet Ramsey, like a lot of these
mhm,
different cases, there was what God was Casey Anthony, and then Scott Peterson. Like there was a lot of different cases where they allowed cameras in the courtroom. A lot of it because it was in California, number one.
yeah.
Number two, a lot of people were sitting there and just needed this transcript for themselves because they were that high profile, where the person was already sitting there. For example, like Even if the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, for example, where I was in Virginia, even if I had not gotten, even if had it not been on television or broadcasted, I would have said, give me the transcript so I could at least have, the transcript of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, had you read the transcript of Amber Heard, Johnny Depp would have looked guilty as all shit.
Because he made a lot
Really
of kind of like
guilty.
sarcastic comments, right? Which you would have lost in translation because he just said,
And what
it just
Amber
comes
Heard
off as,
said that he did, like throwing her against the glass mirror, banging her against this, throwing her against the bar,
yeah, and
banging her on the
there's no
floor.
there's no
Yeah, I
chance to
mean,
assess the credibility. It's like, no, I'm looking at her emotional expression, right? Her facial expressions, the
right,
emotion in her voice, and I think she's not telling the truth, right? You
right,
miss that all in the transcript. All of it's gone.
right. And
So,
so,
and that's
so
it.
there is a double-edged sword when it comes to cameras in the courtroom. For example, like I was actually literally watching last night. So the Menendez brothers, who shotgunned their parents, were tried not once but twice. Okay, the first time there were cameras in the courtroom, and the brothers cried on the stand. People could see them. It was all about how they were molested by their father, and there was a whole line of what happened. The second time around because there was a hung jury from the first one, because they were not
Right.
able to
So,
determine whether that had happened or not. The
so for the
second
benefit of my
time,
legal listeners, that hung jury results in a mistrial, but that does not dismiss the charges. The prosecution can choose to retry with a new jury. So,
right,
yes, a hung jury results in a mistrial, but not a verdict of not guilty, right? When you get the
right,
verdict of not guilty, that's it. You're done. You're over. Go home.
right.
There's no retrial.
And
There's
and
no.
that and that's what and that is what the woman, if you watch it on HLN, if you all the lawyers out there, if you want to watch an HLN, the show is called How It Really Happened. And they show how in the beginning how everything was, oh, my father did this, my father did that. At this point we still don't know what happened, but it shows how there was a hung jury, again, like exactly like what you said, where it goes into another trial. It's not a acquittal. The second time, the judge said no cameras. The second time, the judge said different prosecution. The prosecution went from a female prosecutor to a male prosecutor, and shit got different. And
Yeah.
those two brothers were charged with first degree murder, not one, but both of them. And that's where you see where, I don't want to say the theatrics, but you really can see how the media can look at certain things and the way that their angles are and the way that they
Mhm.
can come out of the courtroom and talk about certain things and tell the audience um, how it can be a Shakespearean theater play.
And people are just naturally orient their face towards a camera when they're speaking. So I've seen people will sometimes face the jury when they answer a question, but I've also
Amber
seen where
Heard.
they'll face the camera while they're answering a question. And
Well,
so,
Amber
and
Heard,
what is
where
lost in
she
that?
was doing it like literally like
Yeah.
when I was in the courtroom with Amber Heard, it was everything was
See,
boom.
Gage Grosskreutz always looked at the jury, right? So he'd turn, he'd
Hmm.
lean in to the microphone, turn to the jury, and say, "That's correct." Kyle Rittenhouse
And
stared straight ahead at the
the
camera.
Menendez brothers looked directly at the prosecutor, and they would
Yeah.
start crying, and then they would turn to the jury and then start crying even more. You know, I mean,
So
there's I will say this: I have always loved theater growing up. Um,
I was going to say
I
that.
was
Yeah, it's theater. It's a theatric performance.
I have loved I was in Broadway theater since I was 9 years old. I was on tour with Donny Osmond and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, where you're on stage and you're having to be happy and you're this and you're that. And then there's a part of you where you're like, oh my God, I can be smart, but also like play a role in front of a courtroom. And it's kind of like playing a part. But then part of me was like, fuck that. I don't want to go to law school. I would just rather go to TV. But there's a lot of people that know that a lot of courtroom is theatrics. And if you don't believe me, fucking Johnny Cochran shoved in your face. Okay. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Okay. That guy was a theater major. Okay. That guy knew exactly how to manipulate an audience. And look at what he did during the OJ trial. He manipulated the entire defense and making it against a racial black versus white versus we all fucking knew OJ killed his wife.
Yeah, but he was found not guilty. No, I'm joking.
You know what I mean? Like
oh, I know.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's where you realize, like,
And that's the double edge.
Exactly. Like where some of these people have not only gone to law school, but they've gone to fucking theater school. They've gone to, they know how to work the television, what have you. And Johnny Cochran, I will say, was one of those guys, at least in the early 90s, because that's where you kind of first saw it. Because the Menendez brothers, you saw the trial on TV, but you didn't really see the archaic lingo where you could see the maneuverings of what was going on. Whereas the O.J. Simpson trial, Johnny Cochran was able to maneuver everything. And with the glove and with this and with the Mark Furman tapes, he was literally able to play that whole thing like a violin. And as far as the racial dichotomy. And you know what? That's a good fucking defense lawyer. That's what they're supposed to do.
No lawyer will ever knock another lawyer for doing their job, for getting a client acquitted, right? Found not guilty. Because your job as a prosecutor is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's our system. It's both our systems, right? Canada and the US. It is the bedrock, the foundation. Without that, you don't have a legal system as we understand it, as we interpret
it. And if you look at the Menendez brothers, okay, who were literally weeks before the O.J. Simpson trial, okay, they were not able to prove that. They got a hung jury.
Yeah.
But they tried to use the whole, my father sexually abused me, my father did this, my father did that. That didn't work. But Johnny Cochran was able to bounce off of Rodney King, the LA riots, all of this other stuff. And as you can call that dirty games, that's a good defense lawyer. That's a really
I would never call it a dirty game. Like the defense lawyer's job is to make sure the prosecution does their job correctly, right? That the police handle evidence correctly, that witnesses are not lying, that the prosecution has properly disclosed evidence and is competent in proving that the accused has committed the crime, had the requisite, so did the action, had the correct mental state beyond a reasonable doubt. Like that's full stop. So anyways, Faran, we're drawing
really quick before we leave, you have to let your audience know, never, ever, 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 and I can say this as a media person, knowing this, never going to law school, but almost wanted to, never give your defendant the opportunity to put a glove on or to give them the opportunity to use the evidence. Because let me tell you, the media used O.J. Simpson with that glove the whole, oh God, I can't do it. I can't do it. That entire thing, you never give the defendant the power to use any kind of evidence towards their way. One, because they will use it. And two, the media, we will run with it. I'm telling you right now.
That's like guy giving Kyle his gun. It's like, Kyle, hold your gun for a second.
Exactly. Never, ever, ever do that, because the media will do that.
I did have one final question. It's a pretty quick question.
Yeah, no.
We did earlier. We mentioned that deadlines can get pretty tight when you're preparing for your shift or your I don't know, what's it called? What's it called when you actually get in front of the camera and start talking to people? Is that a shift? Is that
for your live
slot?
shot or whatever? Yeah, for your time slot, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, would you agree with me that perhaps journalists are taking shortcuts, and that's what can lead to this misreporting on cases? Is it, there's just so much pressure or so much crunch, and you're like, well, I don't have time to fact check this one little thing, so I'm just going to throw a number in here. And if I get it wrong, it's not still going to materially affect how I report the case.
Short answer, no.
No?
I would say a lot of it has to do with making the boss happy.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with, for example,
a compelling story.
For example, like tonight, okay? However you're viewing this story, whenever you're viewing this, for example, tonight, the Biden administration ruled that they want Title 42 to end. Okay. The Supreme Court now has the overall decision on whether or not Title 42 is going to end or not. Okay. If you were to watch Fox, they would say tonight, the Biden administration, they have ruled out Title 42. The border's about to be open. There you go. The gates are flooded open. Migrants are going to be pouring in. Boom. There you go.
Yep.
If you go to CNN, they're going to say tonight, the Biden administration says that, they want to put a halt on Title 42. The Supreme Court has the opportunity to stop this, but the Supreme Court that's ruled 6-3, they're probably going to put a halt to this. And this way, the people that actually need asylum, they're not going to be able to get in, and yada, 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 yada.
Of course, nitpick the narrative that you want to show.
Exactly. So the true story is, if for those that are in the legal realm, is that the Biden administration said, we want Title 42 to be ended, but if you do extend it, Supreme Court, do it till 11:59 on December 27th. You will not hear that narrative on any side. I guarantee.
Unless you literally go read the document yourself.
Exactly. And that's the part that I feel so bad for the American people. However, that's how it's designed now. And that's where
really quick,
at least on my network, I try to do that, like, the most fairly, which you can watch me on newsnetmedia.com. But yeah, so
of course,
shameless plug.
Yeah. No, it's not shameless at all. Please plug. Where can people find you? Can they find you in other places?
I was going to say FaranBalanced on Twitter. I keep everything balanced, Democrat and Republican, where I call both of them out because I hate both of them. Or
politicians suck, guys. That's the spoiler. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle they're on. Politicians suck.
It's not really a spoiler. Everybody knows this. You know that, Tim, right?
Oh,
But
you should see so there's some data that backs that up. I wonder if you've seen some Pew Research studies about the polarization of the American public, how the groups that consider themselves partisan are shrinking, but they're also getting further apart.
Tim, I study this kind of stuff daily because I have covered so many different elections in my life. I mean, I have covered
Oh,
elections in the news since 2012.
it
Okay.
sounds like we're going
And
to have a sequel because I'm a data analyst for politicians. That's what I did in
we're
undergrad
definitely going to
before.
have a sequel. But I'm telling you, here's the teaser to the sequel. We now have the most independent voters that identify as independents
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
more than any time than the Civil frickin' War
Oh,
than
that's not an
ever.
omen at all. That's not an omen.
The Democrats and the Republicans have lost more people in their parties. However, the Democrats have lost more than Republicans, but more people identify as independents than the
Mhm.
Civil War, which at that time was the Whig Party. Um,
Yeah,
but
and
it's
the most
amazing.
polarized America has ever been, right? Like literally a war was fought over it. So
I wouldn't
I
say
would
the most
yeah,
polarized. I
that's
would say
it's oversimplifying, obviously.
I would say it's because when you have more of an independent party than two elite parties, I would say that is, if anything, more time for a third party to
Mhm.
come in and change things up. However, if you ever
The
want me to bring
820.
on my if you ever want me to bring on my good friend Roger Stone, he made it so that in the early 2000s you couldn't bring in a third party and take them seriously because of the way that they would run their parties and whatnot. But the way that our political parties are going, um, the first thing that we needed to do, and this is just something for everybody to think about. A lot of people right now are going to be talking about pulling money and term limits. Okay. Term limits is actually going to push in more money into congressional and senatorial candidates than you realize, because they realize, oh my God, they only have 12 years. Shove
Yeah.
as much money as you can. And oh my God, have them do whatever they can. That's
I
not
do
it.
think legacy media is realizing that their time's almost up. Right? They need to evolve, or they need to evolve, or they're going to get swept up by the independent movement. And Farran, I wanted to ask you.
For
So, of
sure.
course,
For sure.
we've established a foundation that polarization is strong, but also the number of independents is
Mhm.
the largest. What is the media's role in reconciliation in there? So, do you see the media making the problem worse? Or are they trying to make it better? Are they trying to move people to the middle, or do you see media, especially online media, pushing them apart?
I grew up wanting to be that Fox News anchor, wanting to be that CNN anchor, or wherever the hell I could get to be a network anchor gig.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see how there is such an overt agenda um, on both the right and the left, it is so hard to take many things seriously. And when you bring in our generation, for example, Tim, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 36.
Um, never would you could have fooled me, but no,
No,
I'm early 30s.
I I only watch Fox on One Room and CNN in my studio because I need to make sure that I have the latest breaking news going on. But when it comes to actual thought and what's going on in our government, I watch neither. I watch Ben Shapiro. I watch Dave Packman. I watch Breaking Points. I watch Jimmy Dore. I watch a number of different, Jackson Hinkle, Matt Taibbi,
Twitter files, Matt TV. I know
yeah,
that name.
yes, Katie Halper, Aaron Mate. I mean, I've been watching these people. That's where all these people that were like, Matt Taibbi, who's Matt? And I was like, I've been watching Matt Taibbi since he worked in fucking Russia and he was called a Russian asset. And now all of a sudden the Republicans love him. So it's like there's a lot of people that like don't know who these people are that I've actually been watching for a long time.
How quick they flip.
They've been they haven't flipped. They've been pure journalists.
Right.
They've
Matt
been
TV
pure
didn't
journalists.
flip. The people, his fans, the people who follow him, flipped.
Exactly.
Because Democrats are trying to smear and slander him. Republicans love him. Sorry,
100%. 100%. But before, when he was writing books that were anti-Trump, the Democrats literally, spread the bung and licked his asshole. They loved him, and that's one of those things like where you see a lot of these journalists where if you ever see a journalist, and this is my final thing that I'll leave you with, and obviously we're going to have a volume 2.
Oh, yeah. There'll be a sequel. I want to do the Twitter files with you.
Oh, for sure. But these folks that are doing the Twitter files, okay, they literally have been crucified both on the right and the left, which should make you realize that they are all about like, I don't give a shit what you say. And I'll tell you this, I've been crucified on the left and on the right. And I don't give a shit what either says. It's all about logic. So with that said,
I think I can leave my audience. I can leave my audience with this anecdote. The closer you get to the truth, the more enemies you'll make.
Absolutely. And I never realized that until I worked for independent media. Truly.
And until next time, everyone. First off, everyone give a hand, give an applause. Be nice.
No.
Please, thank you. First, Faran, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat about this. We will absolutely have a volume 2, probably in the new year, though. I imagine we're both going to be pretty busy.
Of course, yes.
One last plug. Where can people find you?
You can find me at FaranBalanced.locals.com, where I literally push every single independent media journalist on my channel. Also follow Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, Mike Bellinger, Lou Fang, all these guys that are dropping the Twitter files. I have been covering each and every one of them. But even if you don't support, citizen journalism or, independent journalism, at least just give them a follow and share it and spread it, because just by sharing and spreading it means so much to these folks, and that they are really doing God's work in showing the corruption of what's been going on.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Remember, if you have questions, leave a comment. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like it, give it a thumbs up. That helps me and it helps in the algorithm. Until next time, everyone, stay frosty.